My future daughter-in-law wants me to walk her down the aisle and talk about how much I love her as a daughter, but she tried to make me her dad in all the wrong ways, and I don't want to lie. Posted by you/greatest throw man. I, 41M, have 2 kids with my ex-wife, 42F, they are John, 22M, and Sally, 20F. I live with my wife, 28F, and for the most part, everything was well until my potential future daughter-in-law, I'll call her Abby, came into the picture. My son is engaged to Abby, who seems nice but has been a bit pushy in trying to build relationships with me and my wife, though she's also a bit awkward with her. Abby isn't close to her family, and she has told us many stories about why. While some of her complaints don't seem that bad, it's not my place to judge, and I didn't live through it, so I can't really know. We've tried to be welcoming, but Abby has forced her way into some family traditions where she wouldn't have been invited, and into some where no one outside of specific family would have been. She has been calling Sally sis since they had only been dating a few months, and she has this odd sister/mother-in-law dynamic with my wife. The one I'm not a fan of is that she wants me to be like a father to her. Not because we've clicked or anything, we are very different people. I'm not saying that in a bad way, just pointing out that it's not based on how we get along or anything. My kids and I have a tradition when they come over where we have a private catch-up in my office/study before they leave. This is now even more important to them because, while they both get along well with my wife, they don't yet want to have personal conversations around her. Abby asked if we could talk, and after I explained the tradition, John later asked if I could do it, saying she had never had a caring conversation with her dad. We compromised by not including her in the tradition, but I did join the 2 of them for coffee and let her talk. Then she started calling me dad, and they weren't even engaged yet. John pulled me aside and begged me to let her do that, explaining that I had always been the father she wanted, right in front of her. He said she just wanted that, and told me she cried watching me and Sally interact, wishing she could experience a father/daughter bond like that. I didn't like it, but I did feel bad, so fine, I gave her that. Now, she wants me to walk her down the aisle and do the father/daughter dance. I don't want to walk her down the aisle, and I walk with a cane, so dancing is hard. At my own wedding, I only danced twice. John is begging me to do one, preferably the aisle. They came over on Sunday, and John and I were talking. I thought it was a good time to address the situation when Abby walked in without knocking, asking if he had told me yet. I asked, "Told me what?" John said she wanted me to mention having a second daughter now in my speech and say how I loved her. I just looked at him. She then asked if I would walk and dance with Sally at the wedding, and I said, "Of course." To which she yelled, "I'm your daughter too," and I responded that it will never be the same, Sally is my actual daughter. I tried to explain that I would talk about her being a happy addition to the family and how much I love how happy she makes John, which I thought was a good compromise, but she started crying. John apologized, and they left. He called me when they got home, nearly begging me to agree. Am I wrong because I won't lie and say I love her or that she's my daughter? Update 1 month later. I had planned to write this sooner, but life got in the way in a couple of really good ways. However, since people were helpful and asked for updates, and I have a surprise-free day, here it goes. On Mother's Day, my kids and their partners went to visit my ex-wife. It turns out my ex-wife and Abby are a lot closer than I realized. Abby calls her mom, which is part of where all this is coming from. Apparently, my ex has been encouraging it. During their Mother's Day conversation about the wedding, whenever Abby referred to me, it was as dad. My son apparently told her to let it go, which led to some yelling. Abby was talking about how she deserved to be my daughter, with my ex agreeing and telling her that she was right. My son was trying to explain that I am making an effort and that Abby should be more realistic about things. Sally then told Abby that I only have one daughter, which was apparently a response to Abby saying that as my daughters, they should be united. According to my son, Abby was crying, but Sally said she was crying, yelling, and even kicked something before going to her room. Sally also told me that she went off on their mom, but she won't elaborate, so I don't know exactly what was said, but knowing Sally, it wasn't pretty. Around 2 a.m., I got a text from Sally's partner's phone that said, "Abby really is great, she hasn't been perfect, but you should give her a chance and you will learn to love her." I saw it when I woke up and tried to text back, but I was blocked. So, I called Sally, but they were driving at the time. Later that day, they stopped by my place because I'm on the way, and my daughter prefers my drinks and cooking. They filled me in on what happened the night before. At the end of the visit, I asked to speak to Sally's partner alone. I asked if I had done something to upset her, and she looked confused. I explained that I was blocked. She insisted that I wasn't, but when she checked her phone, it turned out I was. I mentioned it happened after her message, and she asked, "What message?" I showed her the text, but it wasn't on her phone anymore. At that point, we brought Sally in and caught her up. Neither of them were happy about it. A couple of days later, John and Abby dropped by unannounced, not something we really do in this family, but okay, fine. I had made salmon, which doesn't take long to cook, so I prepared 2 more. My wife served while I made drinks. The entire night was Abby trying to bring up the wedding, with John repeatedly trying to change the subject, but Abby wouldn't let it go. We were discussing logistics, as I'm helping them get some good deals through professional contacts I have, when Abby finally said, "So I was talking to Mom, and she said that you can walk me down the aisle and she'll do the dance, or you can dance and she'll walk. It's your call, but you need to choose soon." I reiterated that I couldn't dance. She tried to argue that I had danced a little at my wedding, but I made it clear that was different, and that I didn't feel comfortable walking her down the aisle. She got upset and said, "Mom loves me, why can't you?" I felt bad, but I couldn't lie. I pointed out that she had John, my ex-wife, and all their friends, all people who loved her. She replied, "But other than ex-wife's name, those aren't my parents." To which I said, "Neither am I." She became very emotional, so my wife and I gave them a few minutes alone. Later, when my son and I were alone, he looked exhausted. He explained that after Mother's Day, Abby had called Sally and kept insisting that they were both my daughters, saying I didn't get to be close with one but not both, and that it was them against me. At that point, Sally cried havoc and let slip the dogs of war. Things were said, grievances were aired, and John had to hang up before it escalated further. Abby was shaken, but now there was a new problem. She had convinced herself that I didn't really mean what I had been saying and that I was only doing it for Sally. John assured me that he would handle it. He didn't handle it. Now, I get text messages from Abby every couple of days, acting like we have a secret relationship that Sally doesn't know about. She even called herself my secret daughter and added a lol. She invited my wife to lunch, saying, 2 out of 3 of his girls going out. She's also started using the pressure of showing up at events, like a recent barbecue, to create a certain image. She hugs me more and holds the hug for longer, constantly wanting pictures with just me or my wife and me, but always a few with just me, which she then posts with captions I don't like. My wife is getting especially annoyed with how Abby acts around her. Apparently, Abby surprised her with Father's Day plans for me that had to be shut down, though she still managed to insert herself into the day. Despite this, my wife has a soft spot for Abby, and when she gets emotional, my wife caves. I asked John if he was upset with me, and he said no, he just wished things were different. He reassured me that we're good, but he's worried about his relationship with Sally. That's when I took the advice of some people and suggested premarital counseling. He said he would talk about it. Meanwhile, Abby is insisting that Sally come to her dress fitting. That shop should charge pay-per-view for that potential Royal Rumble, because Sally isn't holding back her feelings anymore. I told John that Sally loves him and that I'll talk to her, but for now, it's stressful all around. Abby is driving my wife crazy with her constant ideas of what my girls should be doing, driving me crazy with all this dad-daughter content, and she's pushed Sally to the edge. Oh, and last night, she sent me an email with 3 different father-daughter dance styles and song options, so I'm definitely not feeling any more respected or heard than before. The 6 of us have barely been in the same room since Father's Day, which was great, until it turned into a complete disaster. Sorry this is so long, but with all the craziness, this is still the abridged version. We're supposed to meet on Friday, and Sally's partner and I have a bet going about how badly it will go. So onward and upward, I guess. I hope you fathers had a less dramatic day than I did. Second update 3.5 months later. I've gotten requests for updates on my situation, and apologies in advance for the length. There's been a lot going on. I mentioned in a comment previously about my wife's pregnancy, and I'm happy to say that it's going well. My main focus has been keeping her as stress-free and pampered as possible. It's such a different experience this time, both because I'm much more involved and because my relationship with my wife is so much better than it was with my ex. Sally has been amazing, and even her partner has been great, helping with the nursery or driving her around when I can't. What my wife doesn't know, because it's a surprise, is that my son has been building a crib for the baby. He's modeling it after the one I built for him and his sister, as a way of showing his support. My son is a good man, and I know he's still in there, he just has a soft spot for Abby. And I guess this is the part of the movie where Godzilla shows up and starts busting up buildings. I called a family meeting with my kids to address the situation. I told John that Sally would only participate in the wedding activities she actually wanted to, and that the guilt-tripping requests had to stop because it was damaging his relationship with her. Sally was relieved that I said it, so she didn't have to do it yet again. I also told him that if he didn't stop Abby from messaging me, I would block her and give her a blunt, honest explanation as to why. We got a lot out in the open, and John seemed to understand. But then, a few days later, they insisted on coming over to talk again. Sally and I decided we would lay everything out on the table this time. We all ate at our place, and Abby immediately started talking about baby shower plans. I told her that was exactly the kind of thing we wanted to discuss. I explained that I understood she's been trying to fill a void in her life, thinking she was gaining a father, a second mother, since she calls my ex-wife mom, and a sister. I told her that while it was still possible to build those relationships, she needed to start listening to us and respecting our boundaries. For the sake of family, I offered her a fresh start, on the condition that moving forward, she would respect those boundaries. My daughter wasn't thrilled with the idea, but because she loves her brother, she was willing to give it a try. Abby tried to suggest that since we were starting fresh, we could define the relationship and just be a family right away. We told her we weren't ready for that it needed to develop naturally. She got upset, pointing out that I'm closer with my daughter's partner, which is true, but that's simply because we get along. She felt she deserved the same closeness for trying so hard. My daughter responded by saying that trying things we actually want would be more effective. That's when Abby ran to our bathroom, and John followed her. After a while, I checked on them and overheard her repeating, "This is not what I wanted." My wife, daughter, and her partner went out to the patio to give them privacy and salvage the night. After a bit, I got a text saying they had just left. I checked in with John the next day, and he said they talked more at home, and Abby understood. For a couple of weeks, things were good. The excessive text stopped, except for the occasional wedding question since the date was getting closer. She stopped pushing herself on my wife and Sally, and we assumed she was involving us less in wedding planning out of respect. They knew they only got the venue at the rate they did because of my professional connections, and I had made it clear that I was willing to help but wasn't interested in being part of the planning, even if I'm good at event planning. We thought things were finally settling down. Then, I got a call from the venue telling me the card I used had been declined. This was a specific card I use for big purchases because of the miles, so I knew it had a high limit. That's when I found out they had changed the wedding date by 2 months, even though they were told I'd still be on the hook for most of the money due to how close it was to the original date. I was furious. I've been fortunate in life financially, but I'm not wealthy enough to just blow off deposits like they're nothing. I called my son and told him he needed to get to the house ASAP, just him. But of course, they both showed up. When they arrived, Abby started with, "Dad." I think I just responded, "You have got to be effing kidding me," and walked toward the table. Abby had the nerve to ask where dinner was. My response wasn't polite, as I made it clear that dinner was not the reason they were there. I hoped my son wouldn't lie to me, so I asked him directly what was going on with the venue. Abby started diving into wedding details, but my son cut her off, explaining that they postponed the wedding because my ex-wife was unavailable due to surgery. He hadn't told me because he was trying to put together the money to cover the lost deposit himself and had just reached out to guests to inform them of the change. And that's when Abby chimed in with, "We have extra time to work on our dance." As this was happening, my wife came home. I was walking her toward the bedroom when Abby made her comment about extra time to work on our dance. With my pregnant wife by my side, I calmly said something like, "I have different feelings about that and will elaborate further shortly." I got my wife settled, gave her some water, turned on her favorite songs, and headed back to the table. That's when I let loose. I said something along the lines of, "You are out of your effing mind. Have you even been listening?" I made it clear that I was done with this nonsense, and we all were. I lost my cool, asking her if she hadn't heard a word we said last time because her head was so far up her rear. She was stunned silent and just looked at me. With little filter, I laid it all out, explaining what Sally and I really thought of our time with her and how she's been trying to force us to love her without even bothering to truly get to know us. She started crying, stood up, and shouted, "Then what was this even for?" John immediately asked what she meant, wondering if she was talking about their relationship, and he started to freak out. Abby, in a frantic state, clarified that she meant delaying the wedding. And here's the kicker, and yes, I'm pouring another drink just to write this, it was all a ploy. Apparently, my ex-wife and Abby came up with the idea that if I had more time, I would come around. My ex told Abby not to worry about the money because I'm loaded. My ex has always been bitter that I make so much more now than I did when we were married, as if my financial success was out of spite rather than a result of my career progression. I honestly believe she did this on purpose, just to stir things up. But she not only told me that lie, she and my ex had also told John the same story. He was distraught, repeatedly saying, "You lied to me," as Abby tried to spin it, but he was letting it all out, about how much he had defended her, covered for her, and now, she had lied to him too. She got defensive, blaming my ex for filling her head with things and blaming me for being stubborn. She yelled, "Why can't I just effing call him dad?" And then, after all this time, I finally heard John snap back, "Because he is not your effing dad." She started crying, saying something about how he was the one who told her she could call me that. John responded that he had only said she might be able to one day, but he had told her again and again to slow down. She broke down, sobbing, and went to sit in her chair but missed and fell to the floor. It was funny in the moment, not gonna lie, and I admittedly chuckled and hid my mouth behind my drink. This only led to more sobbing. I said I needed to check on my wife, and as I walked out, Abby was still repeating, "I just want him to be my dad too." When I came back out, John was walking Abby to the door and apologized. I told him there was no need to apologize, and they left. A few days later, John came over, and we had a good talk. He said they had a long conversation at home, and he even asked her if she would have still dated him if there was never a chance of being part of the family. While he believed her when she said yes, she also admitted that I was a big draw for her. She said I was the kind of dad she always wanted, and my relationship with Sally was what she had always hoped for. The way she said it made John doubt whether she truly loves him for who he is. I brought up marriage counseling again and mentioned how, even though it didn't save my marriage with his mother, it provided clarity and an impartial voice. I pointed out that while they both like coming to me for advice, I can't be impartial. If they are serious about making their relationship work, they need to do it for real and with professional help. Abby texted me, asking if I was the one who suggested therapy. I replied with, "Does it matter if John wants to?" She questioned why it was so bad that she cared about my opinion, and I simply told her that John's opinion should matter most to her. Apparently, this led to a fight between them, but the result was that she agreed to the counseling, and the wedding has been postponed. I may have done a celebratory dance. They're now in counseling, and while John says she's struggling with it, I obviously don't know the details. She's been pushing for Sally and me to attend a session with her, but Sally told her she didn't want to hear Sally unfiltered, and I'm not interested either. On the plus side, Abby has been leaving Sally alone, and she stopped texting me except for the occasional general question, though these still sometimes include attempts to go deeper. My wife still spends time with her occasionally, as Abby is very interested in her pregnancy, more than I'd like, honestly, but it's my wife's choice. So that's where things stand. Sorry this got so long, but booze makes for a terrible editor. Third update 1.5 months later. I was told I should do updates here. People have been asking me to get into what went down on Father's Day and at their mother's house. I've been extremely busy these last few months, but I'm enjoying my temporary unemployment and thought of this account because of some recent Thanksgiving drama. I'll do an update and then share what happened earlier. Oh, and to whoever made the joke about Abby finally getting me to dance, that made me laugh. I shared it with the family. My time has been largely spent caring for my wife. I tend to dote, I know. We're having a boy. We're really excited, though neither of us had a strong gender preference. I've raised both boys and girls, and both experiences were wonderful. Now, we're discussing names and who we're going to honor. I thought everything had been quiet, but I recently found my wife crying and realized I was wrong. Given how busy I've been with work, and with my wife knowing I'd be free again once this month started, she had kept something to herself. Apparently, Abby has been pushing for one Thanksgiving this year. Things had been quiet with Abby. My son said the wedding blowing up woke her up and that therapy had been helping, but then this happened. My understanding is that while John has been talking less with his mother because of everything that happened, Abby has done the opposite. From what my wife told me, Abby dropped by one day with my ex-wife. My wife intensely dislikes my ex-wife because of the lies she spread about our first marriage ending due to infidelity with her. There was no infidelity, and the linear nature of time makes it impossible for us to have slept together back then. Before anyone asks, my ex-wife doesn't actually believe there was infidelity. I could get into that, but I'm sure I'd sound biased. Anyway, my wife looked at our camera app, saw who it was, and called my daughter. Apparently, the two of them had been keeping this from me because I was working 18-hour days, and they didn't want me dealing with anything else. I wish they hadn't done that, but I appreciate the thought. I'm really lucky to have such caring people around me. My daughter called her mom and said something that made them leave in a hurry. She won't tell me what it was, but she smiles when I ask. I called John, but he was dealing with some hard work news, so I just focused on being there for him and left the other matter alone. The next day, Abby came back, this time alone. My wife saw it was her and asked through the door what she wanted. Abby said she wanted to apologize. My wife let her in, she's too nice, and after a pleasant talk, Abby asked about the whole family getting together for Thanksgiving. My wife said, of course, assuming that was already the plan. A couple of days later, in our group chat, we were discussing details, who's bringing what, and Abby asked what else was needed. I said John had already committed, and she asked, what about ex-wife's name? What should she bring? In all the time I've known Abby, she's never made an intentional joke that funny. So I asked what she was talking about. She mentioned the whole family comment. My daughter and I both asked what made her think we counted my ex-wife as family. She actually replied, she is my family. I don't have a dad who wants me, just a mom, and my mom deserves to be with family on Thanksgiving. Sally replied, well, we'll miss you and John then. Abby asked how she could say that. Sally asked how Abby could be so stupid. John said not to call her stupid, and I agreed, that was fair, but I pointed out there was no real way Abby thought my wife meant my ex-wife when she said family. At this point, my wife had filled me in. And then, this is so stupid, Jesus Christ, she used my son's phone to add my ex-wife to the group chat. My ex-wife then thanked us for the invitation and asked what she could bring. As I was typing a reply, my daughter beat me to it and asked what my ex-wife thought she was doing. She made it clear that my ex-wife knew she wasn't welcome, but said it much less politely. My wife added, you couldn't have thought she was included when I said family. Abby responded that my ex-wife wasn't coming as my family but as hers. Sally let her mom have it. She already doesn't talk to her much and said if my ex-wife was there, then she wouldn't be. I clarified that there was never a chance my ex-wife was coming and added that I understood Abby and John wanting to go to their mom's house so she wouldn't be alone. John typed, plans not definite, we'll let you know. He later told me he wasn't going to his mom's place but wanted to tell Abby first. All I can think about is Abby's comment about not having a dad who wants her. It means she's still thinking about me as a dad, I believe, just a negligent one. I mentioned that to my son, and he said he noticed it too. He had even brought it up in therapy because family is such a frequent topic, though I don't know the details. Wow, I thought this would be brief, but it was a lot. I'll share the crazy stories later if there are people reading this who want me to. I don't know how posting here works in terms of visibility, but it feels good to get this out.